thing that I do want to talk about for a moment is kind of the Trump, anyone who would be on the fence in voting for Trump, like the folks who somehow see something that they would vote for in that president. And I wonder, because I've said this, I think in the book club, but I think I've said this in other spaces, but I want to say it more publicly. For me, it feels like a moral imperative. So for me, I probably have shared this story. Like, my son has a friend who's a white young man who said he voted for Trump in the first election for the tax benefits, for the fact that it felt he's an up and coming person. I think has a small business. So he felt that that would be the right thing for him, because of he came from an economic standpoint. When asked, how could you do that? His thing was that. And, I was hot, like my son and his friends who are also friends at this young. No, I was like, yeah, that's cause not to be friends no more. Like, I was, so I was in my judgment about it, which fine. But what I'm thinking to myself is, if we were to have a conversation with someone who were thinking of voting in that direction, what would forget me and my little high horse that I be on. What do you all think about the person who feels torn in the Trump direction? Don't all jump in,
I'll take a stab. I have pondered this for a long time because I think we've had some conversations among us about, at this point, with all he's done, if you still are considering voting for him, I'm not sure what to say, I'm not sure what to lay out. But I have heard from some friends who have kind of been watching Fox News, which I don't watch, and who have said, if you only watch Fox News, you actually believe the world is very different from how it actually is. Like, so there's sort of this steady diet of wrong information and I would say like fear mongering, and so I don't know if it's sort of like, tell me about what it is that you're concerned about and how, and then trying to sort of address the ways that Trump being in office has actually made life harder for all of us. I feel like across class, definitely across racial identity, less. I mean, obviously less so for white folks, but so trying to help them sort of understand, and I think facts are helpful. Just being able to sort of say, oh, well, I've seen different information about that. Let's, can I share with you what I've seen? What do you think about that? If there's a way to enter it, I think something that happens is that it's very easy to just make fun of Trump, and by extension to just make fun of people who support him. And if I was in the role of being made fun of in that way, I probably wouldn't really want to engage in that conversation. So if there's any way to try to like validate that people have their own opinions that they formed, but then try to help them maybe reshape that idea. That's what I think, but I don't know.
I like that. Thank you for saying that too, because it's funny. I was thinking about a conversation I had in Jamaica with a friend of my dad's who loves Trump. This is a man of color. He's probably of Southeast Asian and Black descent, but Jamaican. And he said, I like him. And I think he likes him because he has no filter. And anybody who knows my people in Jamaica know that filters are often absent. So people say what's on their minds. So he was saying that he felt he had that kind of like, say what's on my mind, keep it real kind of attitude. And, in that conversation, because this is my father's friend, I had to tiptoe and be really respectful. But I was like, I just feel like for me, I could not lean on whether or not he had, like tells it like it is, because, and I started to talk about the detention centers, the deportation, the children being separated from their family, and this man has young children. And I said, can you imagine what that would be like for you to have your children, separated and not know where they are? And so that was kind of the point I leaned into. And he took a moment to say, yeah, I would not want that. And so we kind of had what I think Christine is referring to, where it wasn't judgment and it wasn't ridicule, even though that was probably coming, creeping under. But it was like, here's my real concern. So thank you, Christine, for saying that. And Julian, Chow, did you have anything on that particular question about how you would navigate that kind of conversation, or friend or family member?
I think it's two different groups. It feels like, are there people who are undecided? Like, I feel like people, like Trump has pushed the conversation so far. Like, you're either in or you're out. I do feel like there are some issues voters that I am tangentially aware of. One, I kind of feel like this evangelical commitment to trying to have the courts be a certain way. Like Christine talked about podcasts, and I've heard, a couple of those interviews where it's like, yes, we don't like how he talks to people. We don't like that he's a bully, but we believe in, let's say, for example, a pro-life situation, and strategically having judges, pack the courts. And so we'll hold our noses and get this done. I think another piece is the policing piece. I have a neighbor and I have, family members who maybe not themselves, but are sharing stories around like people who are pro-police, maybe even police themselves, kind of feeling like, hey, this is going a little bit too far. Should we be defunding the police? Look at all this violence and this protesting. That's a bridge too far for me. And so I feel like there are certain issues that I think are pushing people in a certain way. And then, like, let's be really real, like, this is the United States, right? I do feel like white rage, white supremacy, let's just call it what it is, has always been part of our country. I do feel like that's a part of it too. And for some of that, I'm probably not the best person to have a very safe, rational, thoughtful conversation about this. And I kind of want to, this kind of connects to an earlier point that may not be connected, but I feel it's important to say. So I want to say, even in my judgment of Kamala Harris and my judgment of Obama, like, I want to say those are people of color in the United States in these high level political positions. And so I also want to say, like, it may not be fair to treat them as all equal to every other politician. Like, there is a strategy to it that I know some about, but not all about. And a piece of that is their identity as people of color. So I just want to say that out loud. White supremacy continues to be a part. And I think that's a part of some of Trump's support too.
Yeah, I would really struggle in this type of conversation with someone about their support for Trump, especially in 2020. I think 2016. It's funny, the morning of the election in 2016. I'm sure I've told you all this story, but I was running late to work, so I took a Lyft, and the Lyft driver was a black man, and we were talking about the election. And as we're talking more and more, I realized, like, he said something that I was like, oh, because I thought we were both talking about, oh yeah, support for Hillary, but he said something. I was like, oh wait, I think he supports Trump. So I asked him, and he's like, yeah, and he talked about like his rationale was, he talked about his admiration for Malcolm X, and then he was comparing Trump and Malcolm X, which I know was like, it blew my mind. And I remember, but one of his main points of comparison was this, and I think Damali, you may have mentioned this, like, he says what's on his mind. He's not afraid to, like, and I'm like, that's where sort of the comparison may start and stop very quickly, because obviously Malcolm X was so much more thoughtful and so intelligent, and so so well read, and there's so many distinctions. So I know that when he was first running, there was some folks out there who were like, yeah, he's not a regular politician. He says what's on his mind and yada yada. I still thought it was like a fairly surface level and not a very accurate comparison, or not a very accurate assessment. But maybe I can give some small lane for that in 2016. In 2020, you've seen what what portion of this country is better off now than it was? Like maybe there's some small subset of like billionaires who are like better off now, but for most people, yeah, maybe, you know, maybe it's enough, because Julie's point about white supremacy, maybe it is enough to have a president in the White House who is so just who is in his he doesn't use dog whistles much, right? He is very candid in his assessment. Are you gonna say, Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with you that it's like, okay, so he says what's on his mind, and he lies to your face. Like, I don't know how that's okay. And this is kind of the connection to, you know, that George W. Bush, he barely got into college. At least there was a sense of principle, whether I agree with it or not. And that's what I think is lacking here is Trump's only principle is himself. And so that's like a moving target, like whatever will benefit me right now in this moment, I'm going to go for it. So even if he speaks, I just don't understand that argument, because he has said out loud to your face how little he thinks of you. And you're like, well, like that guy's honest. Did you hear what he said? Like, I just don't understand that very well.
Yeah. And I mean, sorry, child, were you going to say something else?
No, go ahead.
And I was just thinking, to his own party, his own allies, the people around him, like if I were working in the White House under his administration and I had a position like Dr. Fauci, or I had a position like the Surgeon General, I had a position like any of those people who would be like right up there, I would absolutely walk away from that position, because the way that he treats people with such a lack of respect and like even basic dignity is beyond me. So like for me, it's like a non-starter, like you said.